So the last thing I wanted to show you was just a mini tutorial on picking up stitches. I'm not going to go into too much detail at the moment. I'm going to save that for a larger neckband when I have an actual life-size garment on. But I thought just this tiny little bit on how I pick them up would be a nice little prelude to that. So the way that I do it is to make sure that I take an entire stitch from the edge of the knitting. And so what that means is that I'm putting the needle underneath the two legs because that represents the edge stitch. So that's where I insert my needle. And then otherwise I just treat it much like a normal stitch. And I'm going to use a contrast yarn for this. I'm just going to use this ginger colour here so that you can see things quite distinctly. And so what I would do is to work from right to left. So this is a little bit as you would have the stitches oriented on your needle. If you just imagine for a moment with this neckband that these are all the stitches that you have yet to knit or that you want to pick up for your neckband. So it makes sense for you to pick them up with the stitches on your left hand needle, because if I just place one of my needles like that, that's the kind of thing that you would see when you're about to begin a knitted row anyway. The stitches are being transferred from the left hand side to the right hand side. So I'm going to start with this top right hand corner here. Don't worry if this is a little bit confusing at first, because you have a way of quickly finding out. It will just feel wrong, or you'll just get a little bit tangled, but generally that's the way to think of it. So wherever you start picking your stitches up from, and it will normally be at a shoulder seam, if it's not going to be worked in the round, it will be the left hand shoulder seam normally, and you'll start from there and then just work across all the stitches from one side to the next, and they'll be on your needle as if they were a row of normal knitting, which they will be. It's just the orientation that might throw you off a little bit. So with that in mind, the first stitch that I'm going to pick up is this one here, very close to where I cast off the stitches for this mini jumper bodice. And so what that involves is me putting the left hand needle into the edge stitch. And so because a stitch has two legs, I'm going to make sure that I go through two legs of this edge here, and that's going to act as my stitch on the needle. So I'm going to treat it as though it's a normal one. So this is my stitch to pick up, and then I'm going to take the right hand needle and then insert it into the same space. So again, treating it much like it is a normal stitch. I'm going to get my ginger yarn and then pass it knitwise around the right hand needle. So everything is much the same as normal knitting, it's just that you've got two loops to work through instead of one. And then I'm just going to knit and bring that ginger yarn through, and then that's that stitch picked up. Okay, so I'm just going to go for the next one. And if you need to, you can just pull your knitting apart a little bit here. I'm just going to put the left hand needle down. What you'll see, if I just really pull this apart, you can see that you've got this little ladder forming when you have got the edge stitch pulled away, or the self edge stitch, and you've got these strands or threads connecting one stitch to the next. So you want to work into here, just where I'm poking my fingernail. That's where the needle is going to go when you pick up stitches using this technique. So I'm going to grab my needle and I'm just going to put the needle through that hole. So again, I've got two legs going across the left hand needle, and again I'm just going to knit into that space or that stitch. So again, don't worry if the yarn is loose, that can always be sorted out later. The main thing is that the stitches get picked up. I'm just going to knit as normal, bring that yarn through, and up it comes onto the needle. Okay, so I've done one. The second thing to mention is that when you pick up stitches, because you're going in the opposite direction normally, you're going perpendicular. So you can see that these stitches are lying horizontally, and then the stitches I'm picking up are going vertically. And because stitches are usually wider than they are tall, this means that you usually need to skip stitches when you pick them up. So you don't need to pick up every single stitch, it won't leave a hole. It just means that you get a neckband or armhole band, whatever you're picking up, that lies nice and flat. So I'm just going to wing it for now, just to show you that you don't need to pick up every single stitch. But again, I'll come back to this in a more involved tutorial, because sometimes it's really helpful to just plan out how you're going to pick up stitches so they lie nicely and evenly. So just to make that point, I'm just going to find the next hole, which is this one, and I'm just going to skip it. I'm going to ignore that one completely, and I'm going to go into this next one, just where I've got my little finger poking out here. So that's where my needle's going next, so I'm missing one. So again, everything is the same. I'm just going to put the left-hand needle in here. So again, I've got 2 strands lying across. And again, don't be put off by the fact that, you know, it might look like you've got more than one. The main thing is that you go into that space between the 2 stitches. Once you've done that, it will be fine. And once I've gone a bit further, I will show you how to check that you're working into the right space. It's easier to see once you've done a little bit. So I've got the stitch picked up on the left needle. It's sitting there waiting to be knitted into. So it's been picked up. It's now going to be knitted. And then we just knit as normal. And then that's that done. So I'm just going to go into the next space. Just get the one immediately next to it. So I'm just trying to stretch it out as much as I can so that you can see the space that I'm aiming for. So I'm going in here and then knit. There we go. And I picked up another one, and then yeah, I think I'm going to do. I think I might miss the next one, just because it's fine. And then find the next space. Remember, you've got 2 strands lying across your needle, and then knit into that. And then I've got one more before I get to the very end, so I'm going to work into that space and then knit into that edge stitch. And then that's the first side done. So I mentioned just a little while ago that it's easier to see what you've done once you've picked up a few, and you can note here that I have definitely picked up 1 whole stitch, and we can tell that when we do directional shaping, because it helps you to find where the stitch is. When the shaping becomes a directional feature, it's much easier to see where you're going, especially if you're new to the technique. And so you can see here that this stitch, the next one in from the edge, is still whole. We can see the regular 2 legs of it, as we could before we picked up any stitches at all. So if yours doesn't look like this, or you've ever been confused, just don't worry. Just take the yarn out, and then really don't be afraid to just pull your knitting. I'm just going to pull it like this, so that you can see exactly where the gaps are. So if you want to do a practice bit so that you can find it easily, then that's absolutely fine. I do recommend that. You can just knit a tiny scrap like this, and then you'll get used to working into that ladder, or those gaps between each stitch, the selvage and then the remainder of the fabric. So we had a stitch on hold for some V-neck shaping, and so at this point I'm going to take this little padlock off. I'm just going to open it to begin with. I'm just going to slip that stitch back onto the left hand needle, just making sure that it's not twisted, and then I'm just going to knit that stitch as normal. I'm going to go back and mark it again, but I just sometimes prefer to take it out because it's less likely to be in the way, honestly. But you could leave it on if you wanted to, that is just me. I just like to have a clear gap to aim for when I'm picking up a stitch. So I'm just going to put that back on. And then we're going to do the same thing for the second side. So again, you just pick up as evenly as you can. But you can see that a row of knitting is forming. It's starting to look like it's a normal piece of knitting. And if you need to, where you rejoin the yarn before, this is where you can start feeding it back through. So if you're worried about any gaps or any, weirdness with the loose end of the yarn, you can just feed it back through. Just use your knitting needle and then just gently pull. Sometimes it might be grumpy, but if you can't fix it, or if it's a bit stubborn like mine is now, then be safe in the knowledge that this stitch is not going to be seen by anybody. It's going to be hiding on the wrong side, much like these stitches are here. So don't worry, you've always got a chance, basically. So otherwise, technique is the same, except we're just going up instead of down to go around the second side of the curve. And so needle goes through, again, 2 legs, and then we knit into it. So that's 1 stitch. And then I'm going to find that ladder. So again, pull and find that space just where I'm wiggling my fingernail. And I'm going to put my left needle in there and then knit that stitch also. So I'm going to pick it up and knit it rather. And then, much like the first side, I'm going to miss another one. And it helps to remember what you did first time. So I just did pick up 2, miss 1, pick up 2, miss 1, and that was basically the rhythm I got into. Always handy to get into a rhythm with these things. It just makes life so much easier. So I'm going to get another one. Oops, yep, needle is running away. Okay. And then get another one. So I think I had 6 first for the first side, so I just need to make sure that I get 6 for this side. And then I'm just going to miss 1 and then pick up another. And then sometimes, because this second side where we cast off purlwise is slightly higher, sometimes I just miss 1 again, even though it doesn't match perfectly this first side that we did. Because it's 1 row higher, no one will notice it very much. So I'm just going to miss another one and then knit into that stitch, and then we have got 6 on either side of the mark stitch in the center. So we have got 6 mark stitches, number 7, and then another 6 to make 13 stitches picked up altogether. So for this first side, this first bit of knitting rather, we're going to be on the wrong side because we picked up the stitches with right sides facing, and that's generally what you'll be instructed to do in a knitting pattern. So this first side that we knit, where all the stitches are picked up and we're ready to go, will generally be on the wrong side. So I'm going to do some 1 by 1 ribbing, so knit 1, purl 1 ribbing. And I'm going to begin with a purl stitch so that we begin and end with a knit stitch on the right side of the knitting. So I'm just going to do purl 1 and knit 1. And it also means that the marked stitch in the middle is going to be a knit stitch, and that's going to be important for the shaping technique I want to do on this mini v-neck. More about that in a moment. So just do purl 1 and then knit 1. So it behaves much like a regular piece of knitting at this point. It feels odd because the stitches have been picked up, they're not part of a cohesive fabric, but doesn't matter at all, just go with it. And so it will all look really nice at the end once you've done knit and then purl. And again, edge 1 is loose because the yarn's not attached to anything. Don't worry about it. So long as you've left the tail, you're fine. Okay. And then we have got the beginnings of some ribbing. So what I'm going to do here, this is just a little recap of the central double decrease. I had a separate tutorial for this, which you might want to look at, when I used it to shape waist styles on some of my knitwear designs, like the Bonnie sweater and the Anita cardigan. But you can also use exactly the same technique for V-neck shaping. This is one of my favourite things to do because it creates a lovely mitre in the centre. So I'm going to show you how that works now. So remember, we've got our mark stitch in the centre, which we prepared for a while ago, and that's going to come in handy now when we execute the central double decrease. So I'm just going to get some yarn pulled out, and I'm going to continue with my rib as it's been set before. So I'm going to begin with knit 1, and then purl 1, knit 1, and then purl 1, and then knit 1. I'm just going to stop so that I'm 1 stitch away from the mark stitch in the centre. So at this point I'm going to take the right hand needle and I'm going to slip the next 2 stitches as though I was going to do a knit 2 together. So this is completely different to the slip slip knit decrease that we were doing before. You have to twist the stitches for this one to work. So go in as if to knit 2 together, make sure the yarn is at the back, and then with that knit 2 together orientation of the needles, you then just pass the stitches from left to right, so they're like that, and then we knit the next stitch. So this decrease is worked over 3 stitches, it's a double decrease, and then we want to use the left needle to grab the stitches that we've slipped. So you want to go into the first one and then the second one, so you're taking them together like this, and then you're going to lift them over the top of that stitch you just knitted. And that's the decrease done. So like quite a few of the bits of shaping that we've done so far, it doesn't look like much yet, but it will look like something in a few rows time. So we just continue with the rib as now set. And so because I've eaten up 2 purl stitches within this decrease, I've now got 3 knit stitches next to each other. So you just work the stitches as they appear. So you've got a knit stitch, a purl stitch, a knit stitch, another purl stitch, and then a knit stitch again. So that completes the row. Okay. And so we can now turn over back to the wrong side, and then you can see in the middle here that we have got 3 purl stitches in a row now. So again, we just work the stitches as they appear. We know that purl stitches have got that bump directly underneath the needle, and the knit stitches have that V. And because the pattern, the rib pattern, is starting to take shape, hopefully it'll be easy for you to see which stitch is which. But either way, so long as you remember which stitch you began the row with, so in this case we began the wrong side with a purl stitch, that will also help you. So make notes for yourself. I mean, I can't do that here because I've run out of hands, but do that for yourself as well because you have leisure to. So we begin the wrong side row with purl 1, and then we do knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, and then we're going to purl 3 because this is that group of 3 in the middle, and then we do knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, and then that completes the next row. So again, it is a lot of knitting in a tiny space, but when you have a life-size neckband it will be a bit more meaningful. And again, I do encourage you to have a look at the central double decrease tutorial because I do that over a much wider scale so you can see it. But for the base of a neckband, because that's a tighter space anyway, it will just look a little bit more compressed. So you will be doing it right. Don't worry about how it looks, it will all come out in the wash. So I'm just going to do the same thing again on this row. And what this second pass is going to do is reset the stitches so that it's a normal rib again. This group of 3 knit stitches in the middle is going to disappear now. So we begin the row with knit 1, and then we purl 1, and then we knit 1, and then we purl 1. Oops, careful. And then same technique again, we slip the next 2 stitches as though to knit 2 together. So in we go, take the 2 stitches as though they were 1, so going into the second one first. So pass that from left to right needle, and then we knit the next stitch on the left hand needle, and then we grab the 2 slip stitches. These will look cramped and twisted, but we want to grab both of them and then lift them over the top of the right hand needle and off the end, and then that's the decrease done again. So we can now continue with the rest of the rib. Our next stitch is a purl stitch, and then we can just work until the end of the row. Okay. Yeah. So having done a few more rows now, hopefully you can see this lovely little mitered detail. I'm gonna, I think, have I got enough room? I don't know, let's be on an adventure. I'm gonna knit a couple more stitches or a couple more rows of this, and then we can see, I can show you how it looks when you cast off using this same central double decrease technique. So I'm just going to skip ahead for a few rows and then come back when I'm ready to cast things off. Okay, so I've done 2 more rows of rib. I've worked the central double decrease technique again, and you can see that I've got the 3 knit stitches in a row together for this row where I want to cast off the stitches. If you use this for V-neck shaping, I highly recommend that you cast off so that you've got 3 knit stitches together, because when you cast off, this means that you'll have the rib perfectly alternating again, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, as it is for single rib. Because when you cast off using the central double decrease for a V-neck, you need to work the technique as you cast off the stitches so that the V-neck doesn't go all floppy and weird in the center of the neckline. And you don't want that because everyone can see it. You can't hide that. We could hide the loose thread at the bottom here, and you can see that that stitch doesn't look stretched anymore. I mean, we can't see it. It hasn't affected the rest of the knitting. So this is somewhere where you really don't have to worry too much. Here, though, is where I recommend a little bit more attention to detail. So I've only got 7 stitches left, which is not much at all. And this is representing the center of the V-neck. You would obviously have more of this for a child or adult size neckband, but the same principle applies. So I'm just going to cast off in rib, and so I'm just going to keep up the rib pattern as before. So I'm going to do knit 1, and then purl 1, and then cast that off, grab the stitch at the back, lift it over the one at the front and off the end of the needle. And then here we are in position to do the central double decrease. And so you just do that as normal. So we're going to slip the next 2 stitches as though to knit 2 together. So right needle goes into the second stitch from the end of the left, gets wiggled into so that we pick up both the stitches at the same time. Pass it from left to right needle, and then we knit the next stitch. And then once we've knitted that next stitch, we're going to go for the 2 stitches that we slipped, get the left needle into them, and then pass them over so that they drop off. So the technique is exactly the same. Nothing has changed. The difference here, though, is that we've got this purl stitch that we did a few seconds ago, which is now waiting to be cast off. And because we've executed the central double decrease, we can now cast off that purl stitch that's been waiting patiently. So we've done the decrease, grab that purl stitch, lift it over the top and off the end. There we go, so we've just cast that off. And then we can purl the next stitch and then cast off as normal until the end. of the row, which is a tiny row because, let's face it, we've just been losing stitches the whole time, so it can only get smaller. And then again, I'm just going to set the knitting down. I'm going to cut the yarn and just thread it carefully through the center of the final stitch. And again, don't yank it, just pull it up really gently so it doesn't stretch out of shape. And there we have it. So you can see that by working the central double decrease, so that with the rib resetting, so when you begin the row, make sure that you want to cast off on, make sure that you've got the 3 knit stitches next to each other. This means that you then have that nice rhythm of knit 1, purl 1, continuing all the way through. So if I pull that apart a little bit, as I am, you can see that it's perfectly mitered right up until the very edge, and that's going to look really lovely as a neckband. So please do your best to imagine that this is going to be a full neckband. If you've got a garment that you're working on and you're doing this technique, this is going to be very satisfying, let me tell you. So this is now finished. This stitch marker has done its job. We can take it out, and we've made sure that you can always find it, and we knew where the center stitch was. And then that's it. We have directional shaping, we had symmetrical shaping, and we had a central double decrease. And just look at all that lovely symmetry. It is so satisfying when you do it this way. And you know, directional shaping, it keeps your edges neat. It made it very easy for me to pick up these stitches at the edge. So again, if you're new to picking up stitches, I highly recommend that you put your decreases 1 or 2 stitches in from the edge. I put mine 2 stitches away from the end. You could do it as 1, it depends. Experiment and see how it looks. But in any case, it makes the finishing a heck of a lot easier when you come to do it. So I hope that was helpful, and please, you know, share this video, give it the usual love, thumbs up, comments, etc. if you found it helpful, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.